This is the first in a 5-part series looking at the church as God planned it. In this series, we shall look at the church as a concept, the form a church should take, the function of the church, personalities within the church, and the problems that can arise within the church, and how to deal with them. There is the principle in Bible study known as the law of first mention. That is, the first time a word is mentioned will give an indication of the use of the word throughout the rest of the Bible. The first time we have church mentioned in the Bible is in the New Testament, in Matthew chapter 16. Then he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Note that it is Christ who is going to build his church, and Christ who is going to protect it. This passage has sometimes been used in the wrong way. The confusion comes from the use of the word Peter, which means a stone. So on first reading, knowing this, that Peter means stone, you might think that Jesus is saying, "I tell you, you are," instead of Peter, "a stone, and on this rock or stone I will build my church," as in, I will build my church upon Peter, upon the stone, upon you. But that's not actually the case. They're actually two separate words. One is Peter, a small stone. The other one is rock, a large stone. Okay, so it's not Peter that is going to be built upon. It is the statement that Peter made that is going to be built upon. We can see this just a few verses later when Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you're not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of men." Here we see within a few verses, he is just a man, and he is not perfect in any way. It is the statement that is the rock. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. When the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place. And suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And divided tongues as of fire appeared to them, and rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak in other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. This moment, the day of Pentecost, is considered by most people who have studied the Bible to be the day that the church begins. It is the moment when the Holy Spirit first permanently indwelt humans. In the Old Testament, the words that are used of the Holy Spirit is usually, "and the Holy Spirit came upon somebody," rather than filled them. Later, the Bible will talk about the indwelling Holy Spirit. This is the comforter that Jesus promises in the Gospel. Most people would agree that this was the first day that the church existed. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews, Greeks, or the Church of God. You'll note that in the Gospels, it usually talks of Jews and Gentiles, or Jews and Greeks. Now, however, there's a new classification of people. It is the Jews, the Gentiles, and the Church of God. This would indicate that although the very earliest members of the church were Jewish, it does not mean that the church is a continuation or alteration of the house of Israel. It is a completely separate and new thing. That's why we have the Jews, the Greeks, or the Church of God. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you are called to one hope that belongs to your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father for all, who is over all and through all and in all. There is one universal church, into which we have all become a part upon salvation. This is not to be confused with the local church. You will note the expectation of love, humility, gentleness, patience, and uniformity in the faith and doctrine. This is a far step from where we find ourselves at the moment. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. Here we see something a little different. Here it can be seen that Paul refers not to the church, but rather to churches. And so we must now examine what this could mean. If, therefore, the whole church comes together and all speak in tongues, and outsiders or unbelievers enter, will they not say that you are out of your minds? Note the whole church gathering together. This would not be possible were talking about the universal church. Even when Paul was writing 1 Corinthians, the practicalities of getting the universal church to meet together in one place was not possible. So it must be something else. It must be that this is a local church which is all meeting together. So it's not the same thing as the universal church. You will note that this is not a building that is being referred to here. Nowhere in the Bible is a building referred to as the church or as a church. The church are people. As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. Note that each church has its own lampstand and its own angel watching over it. Little do we know or understand the angelic beings' tasks. Each church has its own victories and failings. And Ephesus is not bearing the reward or responsibilities of Sardis. These passages that we've just read, when taken together, would show us that there is the universal church, which includes every Christian who has ever lived. And in order to become part of the universal church, all that is required is to place faith and trust in the sacrificial death of Christ at Calvary and his subsequent resurrection. Then there is the local church, which is an independent entity responsible for its own actions and worthy of the praise that it has earned by itself. As most of the references and teachings in the New Testament has the local church in mind, it will be this that I will be referring to for the rest of the series. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I among them. This was a statement made by Christ not long before he ascended back up into heaven. But the question is, does this verse mean that whenever 2 Christians meet, then that is a church? I would suggest no. The tense of this verse is a little lost in the English. It would be better put are meeting and have been regularly meeting. Also important is the qualifier, in my name. A chance meeting in the street would not qualify in this situation. This will become an important point as we continue through the study.